Hey UConn Nation, it's KK Arnold here. If you're looking for the latest UConn women's basketball content, go subscribe to Listen Up to Phil and Ryan. Go Huskies!
You know it's important when you get an ESPN notification on your phone regarding the way too early top 25 for the 24-25 season. But then you know it's really, really important when you're sitting there eating lunch and a text message pops up from Ryan saying, Phil, we got to have an episode on Listen Up. It's Phil and Ryan back on Listen Up. Thank you, KK. And in this episode, Ryan, we're going to break down just very quickly and then get into some comments from our subs. If you haven't already, please subscribe, like, and comment. It goes a long way, not just for Ryan and I, but for the whole UConn family, the whole UConn community. Ryan, no surprise, South Carolina Gamecocks stay at number one in this way too early top 25 NCAA basketball. I want to shout out to Charlie Crean. Thank you so much for bringing us this news today, this great article. Ryan, however you're looking at it on your laptop, on your app, on your phone, and to everyone out there, I'll break it down for you very quickly. He did a great job. Ryan, what's your biggest takeaway? He talked about a little bit about Beckers and AZ Fudd. They have only played 17 games together in 3 seasons. And then he goes on to say they should have help in the form of Princeton transfer Caitlin Chen, returners Ashlyn Shade and KK Arnold, who got bigger minutes. And then he brought up Sarah Strong, like I did in the last video, if she can live up to the billing as the nation's top recruit. But I think that this was the most interesting thing to me that stuck out, Ryan. There are 5 way too early top 25 opponents on UConn's pre-January schedule. And he said, so the Huskies will know early if that is truly the case. Yeah, they're going to get tested quite early and often. But I tell you what, Ryan, I'll leave you with this. I thought about having a episode. It's funny he mentioned this. I really thought about this, and I thought about mentioning it to you right now. I think this is really, and every year, right? This I might take a lot of criticism for this. You might give me criticism for it. I think that this may be the best team that Paige Beckers has behind her this year.
Yeah, I think you could probably make a pretty good argument for that. But yeah, I mean, now that all the dust has settled from
And
all
I'm
the
sorry, I don't
teams.
want to cut you off. All the players since we've been covering UConn, they have been great. All those teams have been great. So I'm just saying, with that, with the freshmen coming in, and Ryan, in my opinion, I think that this is their best shot so far since we've been on this podcast.
Yeah, I think Paige's freshman year, that team was pretty good with Olivia Nelson, Adota, Kristen Williams. When we lost those three seniors, I believe, to the draft, I think it was three. It might have
Yeah.
been just those two, but that was a pretty good team where they unfortunately come up just short of winning the national championship. But yeah, of course, ESPN comes out with another way too early top 25 ranking list. I believe the first one we did, I guess it was the first one about 4 months ago. I think we did a video on it, and a couple of the teams did change places. But yeah, like I said, with all the teams moving conferences that we talked about, a couple coaches retiring, moving to new teams as well, all the players switching teams. I think I read over 1,000 players uh, entering the transfer portal. So yet another crazy off season, and just 40 days away now from South Carolina beginning their
Yeah.
title defense against Michigan. Of course, like you said, the Gamecocks remain number one in the rankings, and rightfully so. And I think they're going to stay number one until somebody beats them. And I think even with one loss, they're probably still going to remain in the top three. They kept a lot of players, but will be without, of course, Camila Cardoso. But they still will have Chloe Kitts, Sakima Walker, and Joyce Edwards, who's the number three recruit. All those players, of course, being in the front court. And then, of course, we moved down a spot. Our Huskies moved up one spot to number two, jumping ahead of USC, who moves down to number three. And of course, you mentioned the note that I read as well. Before January, the Huskies will play 5 teams ranked in the top 25 on this list. So we've talked about during the offseason that how tough the UConn Husky non-conference schedule is. So we should definitely get a very good idea of how good UConn really is by January. And like I said, the Trojans, one of those teams that UConn has to play who have very big expectations for this season with arguably the best transfer portal pickups and recruiting class as well. And not to mention, they still have freshman sensation Juju Watkins. So I know all of you guys and us as well can't wait for that matchup in stores. UCLA comes in at number 4, who also had transfer portal signings, including Janiah Barker, Carlise Lager Walker, and Tamia Gardner as well, who also joined Lauren Betts and Kiki Rice. So the Bruins and Trojans should be in for a heck of a battle for the top spot in their new conference, which is the Big Ten. And then, of course, rounding out the top 5, the Texas Longhorns, and also dropping a couple spots is Notre Dame at number 6. These two teams have had to deal with a lot of injuries, just like UConn has over the past couple seasons. Rory Harmon also played, or she did play until December before missing the season. And Maddie Westbeld will start the year on the sidelines, unfortunately, for the Fighting Irish. So Notre Dame looks to kind of fight through these injuries once again. And Texas looks forward to playing a full season with Rory Harmon and Madison Booker together. So, watching those teams should be interesting. Then, of course, rounding out the rest of the top 10, LSU remains at number 7, Iowa State at 8, NC State at 9, and Duke comes in at number 10.
Shout out to the Middletown. Thank you for that. Shout out to the Middletown native Sailor Poffenbarger in Maryland, right? They expect a big season in College Park, and they cracked the top 25, right, Ryan? But, one question I have for you before we get into comments, I think it's interesting because now we're talking about ESPN's top 25, way too early rankings. I want to switch over to the AP poll. AP the Associated Press preseason top 25 from last year. And I know in UConn we don't really get wrapped up in the preseason rankings, the way too earlys, and on and on. But again, I think it's worth at least talking about, especially asking you. That's what I always do, right? I bring all my information, just throw it on Ryan. No, I'm just kidding. But what do you make of this now that, of course, ESPN is, and every year I think it's very fitting that you favor UConn as one of the tops. But what's your any concern at all? If you remember last year, Ryan, number 1 LSU, number 2 UConn. Again, this wasn't from ESPN. This was from AP. So, but again, with the exception of the injuries, I get it. That's a big reason why. Is there anything that could be slowing down UConn once again? Because again, I keep seeing them get national praise like they should. And it seems like to me, they just, and again, the injuries, I've already pointed that out. But if they stay healthy this year, will we still see a slide for some odd reason?
Well, I mean, the hope is obviously not because we've come to believe, hopefully, that is the big reason that UConn hasn't really been able to get over that hump in the last couple years is because of those injuries that they've had to battle, and mostly due, I guess, to the championship drought as well now because of those injuries. But yeah, I mean, there's not much. I don't really think that can hold this team back. Of course, we talk about expectations a lot, so I think living up to those, especially for the freshmen coming in, can be a little difficult at first, but I think we have obviously some great seniors on this team to kind of lead the younger players. So I think, there's not really much that can hold this team back. Of course, a tough schedule, I think, to begin the season. So hopefully we can get through that, pretty easily. But yeah, I mean, I think for UConn this year, just avoiding the injuries and just staying the course, I think we should still be in for a pretty fun ride.
Here we go. Bon Riley says, I would predict that if any UConn player decides to go in transfer portal, it would be Caden Samuels. Ooh, Ryan, I would not like to see that because I just got done talking to you about some plans that Samuels might be considered in. And that's a surprise. Let's not announce what that might be.
Yeah, I can't say I really disagree looking down the whole roster. You probably could pick out Caden Samuels just because she didn't really have much of an impact, unfortunately, last season. I'd say she got a fair amount of playing time, but unfortunately didn't really do a whole lot with those minutes. But hopefully this season, again, a lot of competition, obviously, but hopefully she can get some more opportunities off the bench and maybe improve, driving to the basket, defense. I think there's a lot of things for her to improve on, and I know she worked on those during the off season. So hopefully we see a lot of improvement out of her, and hopefully she can make some more impactful plays for us this season.
Paul seemed to agree with the dark horse statement, Ryan. He said she absolutely will be the dark horse this season. She's versatile, 6'2, strong on defense, smart, and an effective scorer. And again, that's in reference to Morgan Shelley.
Yeah, I think we really did find the dark horse. Of course, there's a lot of good recruiting classes. I went over some of them, like USC, UCLA. Of course, South Carolina is always going to have a good recruiting class along with UConn. But, I'm pretty happy with the three that we have on the team. Of course, we already went over them now. But yeah, I think they can really provide a pretty big boost. Like I said, Sarah Strong's, projected to probably get the most minutes on the team, but I really think Allie and Morgan can really, play a lot of minutes as well and have those impactful moments, hopefully off the bench in a lot more games than just one or two.
Jason D'Amico said, with Shelley's height and ability to move, I'm hoping she can fill some of the void left by Aaliyah's departure and Caroline's shaky comeback status by moving bodies around in the paint and grabbing some much needed rebounds, something we struggled with last year. Good episode, fellas. Peace.
Yeah, I think that's probably the only other thing about holding back this team is the size and the height. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to recruit a lot of size in recent years, so you could argue that's another thing possibly that's been holding this team back. Of course, along with the injuries, those big players down low unfortunately haven't been able to play for us. But yeah, hopefully Sarah Strong can help us out in that department. And I'm really looking forward to the roster breakdown and talking about Caroline Ducharme because she's a player that I really liked as a freshman. Gave us a lot of big minutes. Had some really cool moments in her freshman year. A couple of pretty big games, and unfortunately, those head and neck injuries have held her back for the last two seasons. So hopefully, she can heal up a little bit this season, and we can see her play more as well.
Here's one for you. Too many people want the appearance of winning rather than the practices and the hard work that create a true champion. Ryan, you and I are guilty of it. We talk so much about what happens on the court with these UConn Huskies just because we can't really see what happens off the court when they're really working that much harder to be a champion in March/April, right? So we would like to think, and I know they are working at their best. And you're right. We will see everyone right back here on Listen Up as the roster breakdown resumes. Phil and Rye on Listen Up.